Hello, everybody. Ah, this is a very special day, and I'm pleased to have Mert here, one of the gurus in crypto. Thank you so much for joining, Mert. How are you today?
Good, sir. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm honored to have you. By the way, this is also my 1000th video ever. So you're the special star in the 1000th video. So
Amazing.
it's got to be a banger. We got to make this good. And I'd say about 10,000 people watch this in the first hour. So we better watch what we
Oh,
say.
wow.
Yeah. So it'll be a big one. So I have a pretty loose agenda, but the vision for this video is to be able to answer everything that everybody wanted to ask about layer ones, layer twos, crypto, where the future is going, what the winner could be, what the consensus trade could be. I know you know a lot about everything. I recently saw your video with Andre regarding Phantom and others. You're deep in all chains, but everybody wants to know so much and tap your mind. So basically, I am calling this one the consensus trade because a lot of people want to know what to be in for the future. And as I mentioned, it is my 1000th video. So thank you for coming. And one other fun thing as well. I used to be a meme in 2022 when Solana went down, when FTX happened, everybody mocked me. But I remain steadfast because of data. So that's where we are right now. So let's just jump in. I know you're up there in Toronto, Canada, somewhere.
Yep,
And
correct.
we'll start off with a fun question, a little bit of an icebreaker. Why are Commonwealth countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand? I calculated my audience, and on a per capita basis, more people from those countries watch my channel than anywhere else. And why are so many experts in crypto up in Canada? And how come Canadians love it so much? Any ideas?
That's an interesting question. I would say probably because they've realized how incompetent their own governments are,
Mm,
and they need something else to turn to, and they are just and they're generally well-educated people, and they obviously want to learn more, and so I think crypto is like a pretty obvious thing to turn to. I mean, I think my descent with the government is kind of what got me into crypto in a sense, and kind of the existing system. Um, and so that's my guess, but again,
yeah.
I don't know.
Also, I try to always try to figure this out, and you know, obviously you mentioned well educated, but also on the digital frontier to a large extent, and risk takers. To end up in a place like Australia and New Zealand, you got to take some risk. Going back, it's probably in the genetics somewhere too. So who knows? And you yourself, you've traveled quite a bit in your life, bounced
Mhm.
around the world a bit, from what I understand. So cool. Now that the fun question is out of the way, let's get into the big stuff. So
Sure.
I know you look at everything, and one of the questions that everybody asks, especially people that want to get more into crypto, um, the $1 million question is if you were a developer or if you had a hunger to learn development, and I know you have your own development shop as well called Helios. And by the way,
Mhm.
links for Mert are going to be below in the video description. Please follow him. He's very, very based, very open, very knowledgeable. But a lot of people say, I'm worried about AI. I'm worried about what's happening to traditional jobs. I want to be where it's at in crypto. What would you advise somebody thinking about embarking down a development role? And what chain and what skills would they learn if you're talking to, say, a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old person right now today?
Mhm. It's a good question. I think, and I get this asked sometimes as well by some siblings and younger interns. But first, I would just do what interests you the most instead of overthinking it. So I know that when I was younger, that I would kind of overanalyze. Okay, do I pick AI because it's going to have like a 25% higher salary, or do I pick banking because there's more X? And you're just kind of like writing everything on paper. But really, what you need to do is you need to try it. You need to build something with your own hands and see if you like doing it. With crypto, this is super simple. You literally just I don't know, go on Solana.com/developers, watch a tutorial, and then just write some code. And you can literally write code that moves millions of dollars around the world at the speed of light with no permission. And that's pretty impressive. And just it's basically a superpower in my view. And so do that. If you like it, keep doing it, keep digging, build stuff. there's a lot of the biggest mistake I've seen anybody make in this industry is overthinking stuff and not doing stuff instead, right? You produce theory and insights from action as opposed to the other way around, in my view. And so, and then AI just helps you do it better, in my view. Like, it helps scale you. Like, if you have a good idea, you could probably start a company with yourself, maybe one other person, and some AI, as opposed to needing like all these. Like, for example, I ask AI sometimes for like legal interpretation of like contracts and stuff, and that would have cost me like $5,000-$10,000 to just ask a lawyer. Obviously, that depends on your risk tolerance, but AI really helps scale human capital as opposed to replacing it.
Yes.
Um, but if there's one thing to take away from this, I would just say build stuff in crypto yourself. Like, just don't think, just build, and then see if you like it. If you don't like it, that's a different story. Then you can go at it again. But if you're watching this show, you probably like crypto to begin with.
Exactly. I love that. And do what you love. If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So very good. So that's you mentioned Solana. I don't want this to be all about Solana, but there's been a lot of talk so far this year in 2023. It's been a breakout year, breakout in terms of adoption and building and dApps, and always, the bear is for building. A lot of building did happen in the bear. What do you believe are the three greatest strengths of the Solana ecosystem today? We have high throughput, we've got strong developer adoption, it's well funded, it's a cool stack to build on. But what do you believe the three secret sources are within this actual chain?
That's a great question. Um, I think so. If I think about this quickly, the I'm not going to rank them, but so one would be Solana's kind of approach to shipping software. It's much more pragmatic than it is academic, which people from the EVM ecosystems maybe don't like as much. But I think that's how you're supposed to do most tech. That is not to say never do research or never do academic work, but I do think Ethereum is maybe over indexed on the academic side a bit too much. Whereas maybe you can make the argument that Solana's indexed on the pragmatic side too much, but I think there needs to be some balance of both. And you can see this, right? Like, Solana ships something to production very fast in a very competitive market with alt L1s all being launched around the same time. And then there were some problems, of course, because no software is ever perfect. But then the upgrades were made to the chain extremely fast, right? We added local fee markets. We added quality of service based on stake weight. We added a protocol called Quick to help reduce spam to validators, and just shipping stuff to production, testing it, getting feedback, and then iterating. That's really how engineering works. And
Yes.
I really like that mindset that Solana has. And then two, what that leads to is it attracts or self-selects a certain demographic of builders on the chain, right? People who focus more on product and user-facing applications. They're more pragmatic. And so, for example, I would say, like, in the last bull market, we had two unicorns start on Solana, right? Magic Eden and Phantom. And one of the things you'll notice first when you use those platforms is how good of a user experience they are, right? And so those people came to Solana first. And I think there's many apps like this on Solana now. Like TipLink is a good one. Dialect is a good one. Drip is a good one. And there's other wallets like Soulflare, Backpack, Tensor. And so that's probably number two. And then number three is just going to be, of course, the community, right? You can build tech, and I think maybe over some time period, tech gets commoditized over time, but you can't really commoditize community.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is no blockchain, with the exception of Ethereum, has really been through the same dark ages, let's say, as Solana, right? Like, Ethereum had the kind of the DAO hack, and then the Bitcoiners were like yelling at them the whole time, and then they came through it, and then they became much stronger as a community. And Solana kind of had the same thing, right? There was FTX and SBF. People survived that, and now the chain is stronger, much stronger than before, actually. And that's how you know there's something real there. And that also, since people were like ruthlessly dunking on Solana during that time, what that does is it almost installs like a natural immune system to the community,
Mhm.
such that they now are like, okay, no, that's not correct. This is what we stand for. And then when you do that, you attract other people who think that way, and then you now have a stronger and stronger community. So those are the three I would say.
I love that. And there's a couple of things that I've seen in history too. First of all, the age-old saying, "Never let perfection be the enemy of the good." You may have heard that one before. It goes back
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
3,000 years. And also, when I remember Microsoft in the 90s, even early 2000s, they were shipping product that was 80% done. Did anybody complain? No, it was about speed to market, and you learn from making errors. And why not test with real people too? So I like what you said about the academic thing. There are other chains as well that pretend to be completely academic but never get anything done. But that's a separate issue. We're not going to go down there. So let's talk about product market fit and industries that potentially are ripe for disruption. What do you think Solana could shake up the most? Could it be like stock markets, centralized exchanges, payments, games, NFT places, trading, DeFi,
Hmm.
whatever? Where do you see the most shakeup coming from this chain or even crypto in general?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. If I knew the answer to that, life would be a lot easier. So I think in terms of Solana specifically, there is a term that I really pushed through during the dark ages of Solana, which is called only possible on Solana.
Opus.
And that was the reason I did that was because I was noticing people building the apps that exist on Ethereum, but on Solana, but slightly faster. And like that's not enough, right? What you need to do is the other way around. You need to build things that are only possible on Solana so that developers have no choice but to build on this chain, right? It's like an inherent moat. And I think maybe some good examples of that are so one, and this is probably the most interesting one in my view, is going to be DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, right? So we have everybody probably knows Helium, the uh, decentralized mobile network. They are actually, I think they rolled out like a new campaign of like $20 like phone plans, and even Verizon is like now getting threatened a little bit. So like that's a very interesting, because like before this, there was absolutely no chance for any company to take on mobile networks. Like they're an inherent monopoly due to how telecom networks work. But with Helium, you actually have a chance, and that's kind of a really beautiful part about crypto. You also have something like HiveMapper, right? When you think about mapping data today, what do you think of? You probably think of Google Maps.
Yeah.
And the reason is because they have a monopoly on it. Okay, well, now with HiveMapper, what if you just give people dash cams and then pay them with crypto for mapping the world, and then use the superpowers of crypto, which is bootstrapping community and token networks, to help improve the product? Because with HiveMapper, the data that you get from the maps is also much fresher, right? It refreshes every well, like Google Maps, for example, might refresh every year for certain cities. HiveMapper is depends on how many people there are in that region. So it's actually a better product, and it's
Yeah.
better margins.
I saw an interesting stat on HiveMapper that it had already mapped 30% of the roads on the planet or something crazy like that. Did you hear that statistic?
Possible, yeah. I'm not
Like
sure
50
on the
million
raw
kilometers
numbers.
of roads is the number that stuck in my head, which is like 30%. Is like unbelievable at this
Yeah,
stage. So,
yeah. Yeah, they're actually doing quite well, and they're growing very fast. And another like deepen example is like render network. For example, now with AI becoming much more prevalent, people are going to need access to GPUs. Well, I think a decentralized GPU cluster ran by the community is going to be a pretty good solution for that. And so that's deepen. It's really great because it's like a combination of deep tech, but also it's uniquely enabled by crypto. One of the fun things about HiveMapper is they actually tried it without crypto at first, and it actually didn't really work. And crypto literally made their app possible. And there's not many of those in my view, right? Like most people just put things on a blockchain just within a blockchain, but in this case, it was actually necessary. And then, of course, the most fundamental use case of all is payments, right? Moving money from place X to place Y. You can see this with Visa and how they're using Solana now to do cross border settlements. the way the existing financial system works, most people don't know this, but it's actually kind of hilarious. When you make a transaction with your card, for example, the money doesn't actually leave your bank. What happens is the credit card systems update that information, but the money never moves between your bank and the other bank. It moves at the end of the day, sometimes at the end of 2 days via like a batch process. But with crypto, not only is that much cheaper, it's also less complicated, more permissionless, and much more seamless. And it can also help businesses like Visa actually save money,
Yeah.
and give people from around the world permissionless access with each other instead of having to go through these walled gardens. Um, and then obviously there's JPEGs, and identity could be an interesting one. Um, and DeFi, of course, is a very very cool one. So there's actually a very large. I actually can't keep up anymore.
It's funny because I was always looking for a one-stop shop where I could swap, where I could trade, where I could bridge, where I could do perps. Now it exists. And in fact, there's probably multiple flavors, but I do Jupiter for everything, pull ETH into Jupiter, swap it to Solana, swap Solana to what everything else, play with perps,
Mhm.
set limit orders. That is an extremely powerful technology. And literally, I see that disrupting the likes of Coinbase and Binance ASAP. The pace of adoption on DEX is just insane right now, and I'm seeing a lot of flippenings happen too. The Solana network already flipped Ethereum for NFTs, and it's chasing up the rear now on DEX volume too. Do you see much more flippening happening, or is this just because of the airdrop season driving all the action?
That's a good question. I think certainly a big chunk of it is due to airdrop season, if we're being honest. But also a lot of L2s had these airdrop seasons which never quite got there.
Yeah,
And I think the thing that is most important to note here is that everybody kind of called Solana dead and just wrote it off completely and said Ethereum won everything. Now let's focus on L2s. And now it is, there's obviously some percent of this due to the airdrop, but it is now reality that Solana has flipped Ethereum in certain metrics. And like it's not going to be permanent. Like I'm sure over time, if we expand our time horizons, there's going to be some good competition between the two. Like I don't think anybody's won anything, and I think it's just getting started. But now at least there is the most important thing to understand, in my view, is that now there is a viable ecosystem that is not Ethereum. Because before, people were pretty much stuck with Ethereum. Like they had no other choice. You either use Ethereum or you use its L2s. That's it.
yeah,
Now it's like, okay, there's another system here which has been tested in battle multiple times, and it's actually surpassing Ethereum in certain metrics. And so now you have choice. And when that happens, hopefully what that leads to is competition between the ecosystems, and then we get the best possible outcome for crypto going forward. So I do think there will be more flippings in the future, but I also think Ethereum will probably flip Solana in some things in the future as well. Um, it's really hard to see how that's going to play out. I don't think anybody can really reasonably make that prediction, but we'll do our best to provide the best possible experience for developers and users.
yeah. Speaking of that, actually, it triggers a question. What is your vision for tools for Salon to make it easier as a consumer chain, as a scalable chain, as a developer chain for the next, say, 5 to 10 years? How do you make all of that happen? Is everything there now today, or are there still gaps? I know there are gaps, but what do you think those gaps are, and what tools would you recommend there be a focus on for development houses like yourselves?
There
Because
is certainly
yeah,
many,
we know Totally always says eating glass with Rust and stuff like that, but
yeah,
some other languages aren't perfect either.
yeah. I think there's certainly a lot of work to be done still. I mean, even it really depends on the level of abstraction you want to focus on. Even on the user level, there's like the wallet experience isn't what it should be yet. On the app level, I don't think the abstraction is what it should be yet. On the RPC level, I think there's performance issues. On the Solana side, there's still performance issues. So every single part of the ecosystem needs to do more work, and they will keep doing it, as we've seen. Um, I think currently one thing that's going to be probably the most important thing for Solana right now is the second validator client, which is Firedancer.
Yep.
Um, and that's a very big step towards more decentralization and de-risking of the network. So I think that's like the biggest one. But then there's always problems, right? Like in any engineering system, you just have to prioritize on what you think is the biggest fire and put that out, and then put out the next one. And that's generally, contrary to popular belief, that's actually basically how companies work. Like
Yeah.
nobody has it all figured out at all times.
Well, let's jump onto Firedancer because that thing has amazed me. The blue ocean. What happens if there's a validator that makes sure the whole system is robustified and it can run at 1 million or 1.2 million TPS? It basically, theoretically, could make all of the chains very redundant right now. But one of the questions I've always had is, how does that affect or how does that improve decentralization? First of all, and if you have a validator that runs at 50k TPS, can they also run the same code set and pivot completely away from their hardware stack to this new validator? This is stuff that I haven't been able to figure out yet. Like, I know that um,
Hmm.
I can't remember the name of the organization that runs it. Uh,
Jump.
Jump, yes, Jump Crypto. Could that be a threat to decentralization if they're running everything, running all the transactions on their set of boxes?
Yeah. So there's a lot of misconceptions around this from a lot of people I've seen on Twitter.
Yep.
So let's see, where do I start? So one, maybe, or zero, let's say step zero, it's not going to lead to a million TPS. That is, I would not have that expectation. That now there's a path to it, but that is not what's going to happen at launch. The most important part of the new validator client is going to be de-risking failure. And what I mean by that is currently there's only one client, and that's the Solana Labs client. And let's say there's a catastrophic bug in that program, or in that client, in that software. Well, now there's no alternative other than to fix that and maybe halt the blockchain while we fix that, right? And that's not really acceptable. And so what you need to do, and so what Firedancer is doing, is they're rewriting the client in a different language, C instead of Rust. And what that does is it drastically reduces the probability that the same catastrophic bug exists in both implementations. So the probability of arbitrary failure is much lower, right? So that's the number one thing. And then what that means is security is much better, because there is the probability that there's a security bug that actually destroys the whole system is very low now. And then number two, what that does is, so for example, here's what you could do. You could actually run both validators simultaneously. And we think that the top 33% of the network will do this because, money's not an issue for them. And they will run two nodes. The Firedancer will be the primary node, but then if something happens to it, they'll fall back to the Solana node. And in that case, you have better liveness as well. So that's and so also, it's what we think is going to happen is Firedancer is going to improve, or it's going to get more performance out of existing or lesser hardware,
Yes.
which means that hardware requirements are slightly lower. It's probably not going to be that much lower, but slightly lower. And that means you can maybe get more nodes running on the network, which helps with decentralization and security. And so that's one thing. In terms of, I think I've heard some people say, like, is this centralizing because like Jump, it's Jump's thing, but like what that misses is that it's open source software, right? It's open source software that anybody can see and run themselves. And like Jump, once they release the code, if other validator clients want to run this new client, or if other validators want to run this new client, there's nothing Jump can do about that, right? Like, it's just open source software at the end of the day. So Jump might have better domain knowledge of it at first because they're the ones building it. But Solana Labs and then everybody else who's interested in core Solana development are able to read it and learn. And I think that's going to be, and like, the other part of this, of course, is performance, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be, or no, it's certainly not going to be a million TPS, but it is certainly going to be high performance due to like the how granular their performance optimizations are. And so that is to say, TLDR, it's going to be mostly really good for reducing the probability of there being like a catastrophic failure in Solana. And then over time, it'll help with liveness failure, performance, and hardware requirements.
And of course, more decentralization as well. Very good points. Um, one of the concerns that probably some people have is, and I've never gotten a good answer to this question, but what is the better approach to building blockchain? Modular or monolithic? And for me, I always try think of the kind of the Occam's razor. The simplest, most logical is always the answer, and it's not a whole bunch of modular pieces stuck together with band-aids. I'd love your take on that and what that means for the two different breeds of chains, Ethereum based versus Solana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a spicy question. So there's, for people who are unfamiliar, there's two blockchain design paradigms. Let's say there's modular and there's integrated, and the difference is, so a blockchain is made up of a few parts. There's the settlement part, there's data availability part, there's execution, and what the modular system philosophy says is like there can be a different team or solution handling each of these. So, for example, maybe we use a like Arbitrum for execution, maybe we use Ethereum for settlement, and then maybe we use Celestia for data availability. Solana says no. What we want is all that to be integrated, and so Solana does all these things internally, and there's certainly trade-offs. I don't think there is necessarily a right way to do it. I think nobody has the data necessary to make the claim that modular or integrated is a superior way at this point. But what I can say is, if you look at history, this kind of dichotomy has always existed. And generally what happens is, as things tend to become more successful, they tend to integrate more and become more and more like an integrated system. For example, I'm going to guess some people watching this have seen the new MacBook with their own Apple silicon, like the M1 or M2, M3 chips. Okay, well, so that's actually a perfect example of this. They used chips made by other people at first, so like it was a more modular stack. But then they're like, wait a minute, we know how to do this. We're going to incorporate in-house, and they integrate into their own systems. And the end result is a better laptop, right? It's a better product. And so what I think, how I like to think about this is that the overwhelming bottleneck for crypto right now is the lack of useful applications, right? Basically, we need more useful applications. That is the number one problem. And I think that the probability of success for arriving at those applications is much higher if you use an integrated system like Solana, because you have many less things to worry about as a developer or product builder, right? You don't have to worry about how the trust assumptions of like what happens if your data availability layer changes, if the system is actually going to scale Ethereum's roadmap, like if dank sharding goes live. You don't have to worry about any of these. You can just build something that works right this second, right? And that's just, I think, that's the overwhelming bottleneck. Like 95% of the biggest problems in this space. That is not to say modular isn't necessary. I just think it requires much more work to abstract that away from the user and developer. That's not to say they can't do it. They will do it. But currently, I think we don't have a sense of urgency in this industry, and we need to get it, right? I'm sick of people like saying, oh, like this will be fixed in 3 years, or like it'll go live in 5 years. It's like people have been saying that for like 8 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm just done. Like I need to start building stuff and put it in the hands of users like right this second. And probably what's going to happen anyways is once the modular folks figure out which combination of modular parts work together the best, they'll probably integrate that to begin with, right? Like Vitalik is already talking about enshrining the ZK EVM,
Yeah, it's a
right?
paper.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so like I don't know. I just think let's focus on building useful things for users first, and I think Solana is the best place to do that right now.
Yeah, when people talk about ZKs and stuff like that, and just layering complexity on top of complexity, it just seems too difficult to me. And also, how important is the issue of finality? Because I see that as critical in the blockchain space, especially when it comes to financial transactions. And when you have things like ZK EVMs, etc., you're not going to get that finality for a while, maybe 10 minutes, maybe sometimes longer. How important is finality to you? And is that also another kind of power of modular chains versus monolithic chains or vice versa?
So finality can be achieved pretty fast with ZK. Not necessarily with optimistic rollups though, because the way an optimistic rollup works is like you post a transaction, but then there's some period of time, usually 7 days, where somebody can prove that that didn't actually happen properly, and so you don't reach full finality. Um, I think it really depends on the type of application you have. Like for example, if it's like a latency sensitive thing like markets, you're going to need fast finality.
Yep.
And that's why Toli's vision is like NASDAQ at the speed of, or
Light.
NASDAQ on the
Fast.
blockchain, right?
Yeah.
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 Because you need that financial data and markets to be propagating everywhere such that there's no information arbitrage and it's final so that people can't take advantage of you. Um, it's not important for all use cases, right? Like, for example, if you're playing a game and maybe the game has some, I don't know, like you're playing RuneScape or something, maybe it's not that important that you actually bought that sword. I mean, it's just a sword, right? Maybe you want to make a different trade off there, and that's fine. Um, but if we're talking like Solana basically optimizes for the lowest possible latency of information sync while remaining decentralized, such that when I have information X at my fingertips, everybody else has the information at that same time, and I can't front run somebody's information.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's how we think about it. But again, I think like you can definitely reach low finality or like pretty sufficient finality with ZK. Not necessarily with optimistic, from what I know about them. Even on Ethereum, it's not too bad. I think it's like a few seconds now. Um, but on Solana, obviously, it's the lowest as it can get for while still also remaining decentralized across like 3,000 nodes.
So, big question for you. I've analyzed industries, leaders, and businesses for over 30 years. And I've always had this premise. I call it the black hole theory. The best, cheapest, fastest, most secure solution wins, and it gets the most market share. Do you think that same age old principle for all industries works the same with crypto too? Do you think there'll be a winner takes most solution out there, or will there just be fragmented niche blockchains, 200 layer twos, etc., running wild in the wild?
I think there is close to a 0% chance of it being that fragmented in the future. And I think it's going to be very Pareto, which is to say like 80% or 20% does 80% of the work. Um, and the reason I say that is because blockchains or crypto is inherently very network effect oriented, right? That's kind of what the token is for, right? And so if there's success, you're able to beget more success due to network effects, and there's speculation, and so that's a kind of a killer combo in terms of expanding. Um, and so probably I think what will happen is two or three blockchains really are pretty much 99% of the use cases, and then of course that is not to say there won't be app chains. Like for example, if an application becomes very large, such that they want to capture their own fees and have more sovereignty, like DYDX, for example, that seems like a reasonable time to or option to pursue an app chain there as well.
Yep.
Um, and so I think, but like the mass, like for example, even with L2s, I think what will happen is like two or three L2s max are going to be almost all of the L2 traffic. There's just no way that you're going to have like 500 L2s and it's just going to be all abstracted away with some magic dust. It's just like I'm
Yeah.
not sure how, if there's any way I can bet against that with my money, which I guess is just buying Solana, I would do that.
Well, you mentioned two or three. Let me show you this little pie chart I put together. Three names now run literally 90% of NFTs. That's Solana is the leader, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. That's it. And that stuff doesn't even belong on Bitcoin. So, exactly what you said, two or three names will get the most. And that is not 80-20, it's like 90-10, but still, it's startling to see. And we are so early yet that the market has not matured. Nobody knows which way is up yet. And that's why I call this video the consensus
Mhm.
trade, because what is that 80% solution? It looks like you're betting with your resources, your development teams, your money on Solana being the consensus trade. Is that fair to say?
I think Solana has the best chance at it in terms of probabilities. Yes.
Okay, good. And what happens to those 200 layer twos? If Ethereum gets their dank sharding figured out, doesn't that make them redundant to
I
some extent?
think what will happen within the L2s is they will compete against each other until like one or two or three arise as the obvious favorites
Mm,
that work well, and then everything, because like just nobody's gonna, the most scarce resource on earth is attention, and you cannot expect people to give attention to that many different things,
no.
right? And so it's what's probably going to happen is something like maybe Arbitrum and maybe like an SVM roll up, and then like one other one will end up winning. Maybe that's Polygon, maybe that's Scroll. I don't know what the actual implementation details there are, but it's just, I mean, in the history of any tech ever, that's just not happened. So, and that's because humans have finite attention.
There's a super interesting statistic, and I think it may have been uttered from your lips, but I'm not sure because I listen to a lot of stuff and I don't actually necessarily look at who's talking. Somebody said, the big talk about crypto is the path to 1 billion users. For that path to be executed, we need one dApp that runs 100 million users. Have you heard that mathematics? Once you get one application with 100 million, it could be Phantom Wallet, it could be a game, it could be a token, a gambling application, it could be whatever. We don't know, payment platform. Have you
Mhm.
heard that math before? And if not, do you believe it? Could 100 million users on one app drive 1 billion users in crypto?
Um, I'm not sure I've heard that specific sentence. I did tweet yesterday. All it takes is one app to change everything you thought you knew about this industry.
Yep.
Because like nobody can really predict the app. Like nobody predicted Facebook, or Snapchat or any of those things, right? Those things just happen, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then that now the paradigm is shifted. Um, Same with ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT was actually pretty big news, and everybody kind of wrote off AI, and they were like, okay, this is just fast math, and it's kind of useless. And then it's like, okay, wait a minute, how is it doing this? Um, and if I focus maybe on your statement, I think probably what that statement is trying to get at is that once you have 100 million users, that's critical mass you need to compound on network effects. Because like if each one of those users tells even one person about crypto, then that's like exponential growth. And then now there's more and more onboarding going on. Um, Personally, I would say, and people probably won't like hearing this, but I don't think we're ready for that as an industry. Um, I don't think the infra would be able to handle it on any side. And I certainly don't think the necessary, I mean, we saw the ledger thing today, right? There's like a
Yep.
ledger security problem. And so that just shows you that we still have a lot of work to do. I do believe that we will get there, but I don't think we're there yet. And what we need, again, going back to my earlier point, is people to focus on building things people want, which is products and things that solve problems,
Yep.
and not focusing on getting nerd sniped by extremely niche infrastructure battles, um, about which L3s to use or something, right? Like that's just not going to be in the interest of the future of this industry, in my view.
Okay, so you're probably correct. If 1 billion users piled on today, everything would break.
Yeah.
But when will the infra be ready? 2025? 2026?
Um, it'll depend on how it's distributed. Like if it's on one app, and it also depends on what the app is. So there's actually quite a few dependencies here. Like if it's something that require, maybe a good way to think about it is just in terms of Web2 analogies, right? Like so Twitter has hundreds of millions of users, but the amount of TPS they do is actually not very high.
Yeah,
Like the amount of times like tweets per second, like writes per second to the Twitter database, for example, is
it's about
actually
5,000,
handled.
isn't it? Five or six
How
thousand.
much?
It's about 5 or 6,000 it can
Yeah,
handle.
so that's yeah, so Solana can already do that today, right? Like so if Twitter itself were to become on chain fully, that would obviously there's some nuances there, but the writes per second would actually scale. But then if you have uh something like I don't know, Instagram or something, what is the writes per second of that, right? Like or Visa, I think they've said they've done 50,000 TPS or something. That also could technically work on Solana right now, assuming the validators upgrade their hardware a little bit. Um, but then what happens then is people are like, oh wait, Visa is on chain. I'm going to bring my stuff on chain too. And so now you have people battling for chain resources. And then if the so that's I don't think we're ready for that. What that would do on Solana is you would start having to bid on priority fees for the state you're accessing, assuming the blocks aren't full. And then if the blocks are full, you would also have a dynamic base fee for the blocks. Um, and I think like a much more elegant solution is something like there's an app called Code, which is like a payments app on Solana. Now they're doing micropayments, but what they do is they actually have like soft confirmations. So like if I send you money, it's like a credit card. It just assumes that the money is sent, and then there's a cryptographic signature, like a durable nonce that stores it, and then they settle it on chain afterwards. So you still get the benefits of the blockchain, but there's a clever kind of mechanism for handling scale there.
Yeah,
Um, so
I'm obsessed with payments because that is a huge use case, and also I've been watching it for 2.5 decades now, with the advent of PayPal, etc. And it was very interesting with Stripe. Stripe is now its valuation I think was cut in a third or something from what it was before, because there's a threat coming from blockchain and crypto that could make Stripe somewhat redundant in the new world. Call it the Web3 world. I hate that term. But do you believe in that too? That disruption to disruptors could actually come from blockchain?
I think I agree with the general idea that blockchain would disrupt in industries, banking specifically. Um, from what I know about Stripe, I don't think they would disrupt Stripe because Stripe are a team of extremely smart people with the Collison brothers, and they would have a crypto strategy. I mean, they already have some crypto APIs, so I don't think like Stripe is a hell of a team. So I think that one they're very nimble. But like existing banks and especially banks outside, like the financial system outside of, or maybe in developing countries, right? Like maybe the South Americas or Africas of the world, those can get a massive upgrade with blockchains like right away.
Yeah.
In fact, even people in Turkey are turning to crypto because like the lira keeps inflating at crazy levels, and so I think there's actually much more of opportunity to disrupt maybe the older financial system in underdeveloped countries. Um, I think there's some ways to describe Stripe there, but like Stripe would be a very difficult one to, and I think they would. It's because I think their mission is something like increase the GDP of the internet or something, and so if this helps them increase or achieve that mission, they would probably just integrate crypto deeper.
Yeah, I don't know if you recall the disruption way back, and I'm going back to the 90s again as well, but this was a radical time where the world went from copper to fiber optic to wireless. And the countries that were the late adopters and the latest technology became the most advanced all of a sudden because they didn't have the legacy to deal with. So they went from like having no copper to either having all fiber or all wireless networks. So do you see a similar type of parallel here with these banking industries in emerging nations or other parts of the world?
Well, so that's kind of like part of Balaji's thesis. If you watch some of Balaji's thing, which is like the West is kind of falling behind because of like regulatory capture, making it impossible to build anything new. For example, I'm sure people saw like Elizabeth Warren trying to just destroy crypto in the past week. But then all that does is it just hinders U.S. innovation, and then it still happens, right? Like people in other countries will still do it. And so I think there's a very real shot that like places like Singapore, Japan, China, and other parts of the world, like India, even,
Dubai.
um, yep, those parts who are more pro building, and actually see the power of this tech. Um, I can see them combined with some other things. I don't think crypto itself is enough just yet. With that ethos, I think they could certainly be a very big force to reckon with. And I think people in the USA who are smart already understand this, right? Like Brian, the Coinbase CEO, he knows this and he talks about it all the time. Coinbase is a huge regulatory effort to help this. Um, Polygon and Solana are even working together to help with the crypto policy in the US. So I think most smart people in crypto in the US are very aware of this, and it's a very real problem. So yeah, talk to your senators.
Exactly. Let's switch gears, talk a bit about the technical stuff regarding token inflation. This is another concern that many people always have. It's like, oh, well, there's kind of a certain supply of inflation for Solana, but could you walk people through the potential deflation process? And that is, the schedule is designed to gradually increase as with the inflation rate over time, but deflation is possible if the demand for tokens outstrips the rate of inflation. Could you walk people through that and the importance of adoption? And that's why it's really not a reason to be concerned, even though the current inflation rate is about 5.1% today. And versus other
Mhm.
chains, it's actually very, very low, considering it's a new chain.
Yeah, so I think the fundamental problem when people think about this is they think linearly, but the reality is a much is non-linear. And what I mean by that is the sentence, while there's inflation right now, is not enough to determine the future of the token. Because if it were, for example, first it would be priced in, but second, people like it would be an obvious bet. You obviously you do need more usage over time for Solana tokenomics to make more sense. For example, this is a perfect example today. I was tweeting about this. The priority fees for accessing important states were increasing, right? That is to say, people were paying more and more in Solana fees to access certain parts of state, like let's say Jupiter. Um, but that didn't affect other people from using the blockchain with low fees, right? That's kind of the important part. And Solana also has a burn mechanism, by the way, like a percent of the fees are actually burned. Um, and the fees, the sold token itself is also used for storage, like for storing your data on the validator's hardware. Um, so like if you put, and then there's also the token is useful for something we call QoS, based on stake weight. So like validators get to land or have some percent of connections based on their stake weights, so that as long as you have a percent based some percent of stake, you get some percent of your voice heard, so that you're not essentially resistant. And so there's like all those different vectors there, and then there's increased usage in the future. And so when you add those up, it's like that's not a straightforward equation. And I don't think any blockchain has figured this out, right? I think like people like LARP that they figured this out. They have not figured this out, um, unless you think there's just no improvements that can be made ever, and that's just not how tech works. Um, and so I would encourage people to like even like look at some of the like Tolly's tweets or mine, and you can see that the fees are actually increasing pretty fast, which is kind of tackles that argument head on. But more importantly, this is something that can always be changed later, right? I think a big problem is like optimizing for profit margins before finding PMF, right?
Yes.
What you want to do is obviously not that. And you want to give people freedom to experiment. You want to experiment, you want to gather data. Once there's something that works, and then maybe you can tweak some parameters to make it better. And like, for example, Ethereum has EIP 1559, but like that didn't go live the first day of Ethereum. That went live like 6 years after Ethereum started. Okay. And Ethereum is not even always deflationary, by the way. People just assume it's just always deflationary. That's not the case. Um, and I don't even think it's it's I'm not even convinced that deflation is actually the right thing to aim for here as well. Like, is that something you aim for, or is it like just an emergent property that you're okay with? Um, so
And
all
I
that is to say, I think, again, I've said this twice already, but I think the much more important thing is we focus on applications in PMF, and then we tweak parameters based on that. But we don't do it prematurely to price out certain use cases.
yeah, I say it in a much cruder way. Adoption fixes everything. Real simple. But
Exactly. Yeah.
and I know you have a hard stop, and a shout out to Toli who made this connection possible as well. Got about 6 minutes left. If you still have, we'll try to keep it to an hour. But there's a lot of talk of maybe Solana being kind of a transaction layer above something like ETH or Bitcoin. Let's break those two apart. Do you think, I know it's feasibly possible, considered like Solana becoming a layer two on top of Bitcoin. Do you think that would solve a lot of Bitcoin's problems, or is that just a stupid idea out of the gate?
I think the problem, like, they wouldn't be able to handle Solana's throughput. That's kind of like the data availability. Like, if you could throw all of Solana's data on Ethereum right now, I mean, there's no reason we wouldn't do that. The problem is you can't. Uh, there's nothing that can do what Solana does today on that scale, and that's why Solana is necessary.
OPOS, OPOS, as you say.
Yeah, Solana itself is only possible on Solana. But like, what you can do is, of course, you can take some of Solana's stack, like the Solana virtual machine, the SVM, and maybe you use that to build an L2 on Ethereum, which is what Eclipse is doing. Um, and so that makes sense. But if you put all of Solana's data, you can't actually put that on any other chain without the chain collapsing. It just wouldn't work.
I put together a tweet. I don't know if I actually have the slide, but it shows you kind of the big macro drainage from the Ethereum ecosystem over to Solana. I don't have it handy, but it's very interesting. Do you think the SVM is part of that right now? Like turning Solana into that black hole that's just sucking everything from Ethereum and the layer twos right now. People are just porting stuff over. I personally got rid of 2/3 of my Ethereum bag and I ported it over and swapped it to Solana um, using Solana. And it was a much less cumbersome method than the other hoops I have to jump through to make it happen in other ways. Uh, do you hear that sucking noise? Is the SVM and the interchain capability part of that?
So I think, like, the way I think about this, and I think this is kind of an unpopular opinion even within Solana. Like, some people don't like me when I say this, but I think here's the facts, right? So Ethereum is going to scale with L2s whether you like it or not. Like, it's going to happen. They're not going to stop working on it because we just said not to. And app chains themselves are also going to keep happening regardless of what anybody wants. And so in that case, then what you want if you're Solana is, okay, well, they might as well use the best tech possible for this. And it's just open source software. And we think that's the SVM. Like, we think the SVM is a much better virtual machine than the EVM, or at least more efficient. And so if something like Eclipse succeeds as an L2 on Ethereum using the SVM, what that tells people is, like, wait a minute, this tech is actually pretty sweet. Like, it works very well. It's a paradigm shift over the EVM, and they can either build on Eclipse, which they can still do, or they can be like, okay, I want to get even more involved with the SVM, and in that case, they use Solana, right? So it's not like a choice. Like, Solana doesn't have a choice. It's either people build L2s without the SVM, or they build L2s with the SVM. So which one would be better for Solana? Obviously, the SVM part. And so people have the illusion of choice here, but there's no choice. And so obviously with the SVM, if it's more prevalent, that also means good things for Solana the blockchain, because one, from a technical perspective, people can upstream changes that they've made, like optimizations they made to the SVM back to Solana the L1. And there's a mindshare aspect to this, right? Like, now you have a lot of smart people trained in how to understand and use the SVM or build on the SVM. And so now, as a developer, you can build in multiple places. And so it's more de-risked for you. Um, so it's absolutely a net positive.
Good, good. Uh, Final question before a final fun question. And this just came to me talking to you. We spoke about moats, we spoke about AI, we spoke about developers. Shamath Palapataya said something very profound about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that was the AI capabilities by the year 2025 will be 1,600 times better than they are today. When you think about that, 2 years from now, AI will be able to spin up maybe the most perfect code in C for a blockchain that could be a Solana killer. But then you spoke about the importance of moat and adoption and community. Uh, which way could this go? Could AI spin up the most perfect blockchain, but it would still need adoption? Is that possible with the viral nature of the world today and network effects? Or is that a threat? Or do you think 10 years from now we'll still have Ethereum and Bitcoin and Solana, or will the world be completely different? It's a head scratcher.
I think um, blockchains are socio-economical machines. That is to say, there's some element of social dynamics, some economics, and then some machinery that's technical. And AI obviously helps you with the machinery. And I mean, by all means, if it helps you write better code, definitely use it. But what it can't do is um, uh, the social layer and the values, and it also probably can't do the economic stuff either, right? At the end of the day, you need to give people a reason to believe in a network, and that could be purely technical. Although I don't think that to be the real case, because over time, most tech converges in the same routes, and then you have marginal competition, right? Like cars, for example. And so what in terms of moat, I think moat is going to be more due to network effects and distribution as opposed to pure tech. I think tech gets you a good head start. For example, Google search, right? Google search was the most dominant search engine for a while due to the tech alone. But I think with ChatGPT now, I find myself using Google search much less, right? That's not to say Google search is irrelevant. That is just to say different things arise over time, and the best thing you can do is focus on what you can. And so I think I don't think it's possible that you can just spin up a block. For example, I think Sui and Aptos, I wouldn't say they have like better tech than Solana, but I think they have like pretty similar tech in terms of performance, and certainly they have less tech debt. Um, and so even theoretically, if they did more TPS, let's say in the next 2 years or something, that's not going to be their bottleneck. The bottleneck is going to be the social layer, the community, the economics, the distribution, right? You can't just be a little bit better in terms of tech. You must be insanely better, right? For example, Solana didn't just release an EVM fork and then increase the hardware requirements. It rebuilt the VVM from the ground up and made something completely different. And I think you need to take big risks like that to actually like. I think moat is not something you have; it's something that emerges over time inherently. Um, so yeah.
So double tapping back, 10 years from now, will Solana exist? Will Bitcoin exist? Will Ethereum exist? Or will the world be different? I think it'll be the same chains.
They will certainly exist. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to kill a blockchain. So they'll certainly exist. I don't have a great idea on what the relative dominance in the market looks like for each of them. Um, if I were to maybe have a hot take on that, I would say Solana will be the most used for sure, and then I think number two will be Ethereum. I don't think Bitcoin will be number three though,
Yeah.
because I think Bitcoin needs to be like you don't even need to use Bitcoin for it to make sense. Kind of that's how I think. But it's like gold, right? You just kind of have it, and that's it.
One thing just popped to mind. I forgot to ask you. You probably saw the VanEck report and their crazy price targets going out to 2030. Did you think that
Yeah.
was nonsense or theoretically feasible, especially when you take into account the debasement of fiat and adoption and the path to a billion users? Like it was very well founded, I thought, when I worked through their pricing model. It was completely rational.
Mhm.
What were your thoughts on that?
I actually had them on our podcast, the guys who wrote the report, and asked them about it. I think their price target was like 3,000 or something, right?
3,200. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I have it.
And what time frame was that? Was it
2030.
10 years?
Pull it up right
2030.
now. Yeah, their bull case, 3,200, 2030.
I mean, all I'll say is in crypto, I've seen much crazier stuff than this. Like, I don't think this would be the craziest thing to have happened to crypto. Um, I certainly wouldn't want the price to get that high right now because it would actually affect development very significantly, such that it'd be very difficult to deploy applications.
Is
Um,
that by the way, people will ask why is that? Is that because they're so rich they don't need to work anymore?
no, no, because when you store data or your data on validators, you need to give them rent, and the rent is denominated in Solana,
Okay.
Sol.
Makes sense.
And as there's more demand, there's the fees go up. But then also, if the Solana's price is up, then you're paying $1,000 to store data. And anyway, there's like solutions like compression that take care of that. But I don't know. Like the price, honestly, is pretty unimportant for me. I think my time horizon is going to be like 20 years for this. So if it goes up over time, great. If it stays the same, whatever. All I care about is secure the network, the decentralization, and use cases.
And you have many fishing poles in the lake building different types of dApps for different types of purposes, and you're hoping you'll strike gold with one of them, correct? Isn't that Helios's mission?
We want to, our mission is to make it, well, our actual mission is to increase the adoption of crypto powered software. And what my goal is if you're a smart person, if you're a developer, if you're a builder, if you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea in your mind and you want to get it out in production, we reduce the friction as much as possible so you can build your app and only focus on your app, not the infrastructure.
So you're almost like the infra for development, if that even makes sense. You excel at
Yeah.
your grease the skids. Final fun question, and I'll let you go. I know you got a tight schedule. Why is crypto so cultish? I've never seen anything like it.
Oh man, that's a very
Like
that's a
I
very
went to the Tesla Cybertruck event and I met every influencer, every head guy, people worth billions of dollars. Everybody was nice. There was no toxicity, no nothing. It was just all one set of good people. Why is crypto
mhm.
so strange?
That's actually a very deep question. I mean, I asked Balaji this on my podcast, and the way he frames it is like it's kind of like religion, where like there's like the monotheist, like I only believe in one God. There's a polytheist, I believe in multiple gods, and then there's some flavors of that. Um, I think it's cultish because it's an industry that is dominated by speculation and narrative, which is first of all crazy to begin with, and so the best story ends up winning because there's not that many use cases yet, right? So in the absence of use cases, you fall back to stories and narrative. But then those stories and narrative are then multiplied or scaled either up or down based on token price. And then so if you have financial incentives combined with storytelling, what you end up having are these stories that you tell yourself and other
Exaggeration.
people,
Yeah.
yes, such that those people are like, that story resonates more with me than that other story, therefore I'm going to join this network and also buy their token. um, and so obviously other ecosystems don't want that, and so they say no, 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 their story is wrong. That's not how you're supposed to do blockchain. Like you should be able to run nodes on Raspberry Pis.
Yeah.
That believe our story. In 10 years this will be the obvious bet. It's like, and I think the actual reason that exists is because there's no actual like obvious use case that is like, as I think you said something like adoption is I don't know, is
Solves
that,
all.
I don't,
Yeah, fixes
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, I think once that happens tribalism goes down.
Yeah.
And but like it never gets reduced, like, or I mean it never gets eliminated, but I think it goes down once there's that. But currently it's just story versus story versus story, and when you have that, that's basically religion, right? Religion is basically based on stories, and then now it's hypercharged by money.
That was
So
brilliant. So the gods basically become bags.
in a
it's,
sense.
it makes complete sense. Hey Mert, I want to thank you so much for spending that hour with us. We loved it. The audience loved it. They're so impressed with your intellect and your sharing, and I'm very grateful as well. Thank you so much. And If ever there's anything we can do for you, let us know. We're here.
Of course,
I'll send
of
you some
course.
great stuff as well. Have a great weekend, my friend. Any questions for me, by the way, or yeah?
No, no, just thanks for having me. Thanks for doing the show. Thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, if you guys need ever help on anything Solana, just ping me on Twitter, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to help.
Yes, and if anybody out there has an idea for an app that will drive 100 million users, Team Helios is all ears, and you can find them on the links below. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. Bye bye.
All right, you too.